Women's suffrage movement. The women's suffrage movement was a pivotal chapter in history and social political change. Emerged as a powerful force in the late 19th and 20th centuries. My thesis was the women's suffrage movement stood as a pivotal challenge to entrenched societal norms, serving as a catalyst for broader social change and establishing a cornerstone for gender equality by securing women's right to vote. The struggle for women's suffrage was not merely a quest for a singular political right. It represented a broader aspiration for equality, social justice, and recognition of women as active participants in democratic societies. The marches of women's suffrage movement were spirited displays of unity and resilience, marked by passionate advocacy for equal voting rights. These marches, notably the 1913 women's suffrage parade in Washington, D.C., and subsequent gatherings across the United States, showcased the determination and courage of suffragists. Braving adversity, they marched shoulder to shoulder. And this was this canvas. So you can see that. The Seneca Falls Convention of 1848 was the first women's right convention in the U.S., where Elizabeth Cady Stanton famously declared the women's lack of rights. Legal, cultural, and social barriers. Prevailing attitudes confined women to domestic roles, limiting their involvement in public affairs and decision-making. For centuries, women were denied the right to vote due to the entrenched societal beliefs and discriminatory practices that viewed them as inferior to men in terms of intellect, capability, and societal role. In the book, Why They Marched, that book said that voting in the 19th century was very different from today, and instead of voting being in schools or churches or in public buildings where you could vote, they were in warehouses, privately owned structures, stables, and saloons, literally places where no respectable lady would venture. So that's where the polling places were set up, and that's why women wouldn't really go there, and that's why men had the upper hand. And then election days were rowdy and chaotic affairs, often featuring a lot of alcohol, incidents of physical intimidation, if not outright violence. So no wonder women's demand for the vote was so hard to process, because it struck the core of the 19th century male political culture, which demonstrates this canvas where you have Lady Liberty holding up the men and the women trying to climb up to get to where the men are. Okay. So not that long ago, it's staggering how the recent milestone of the universal suffrage for women truly is. It's less than a century ago women worldwide were still fighting for the fundamental right to cast their vote. The 19th Amendment in the United States, ratified in, I think it was 1920 if I'm correct. And it was only a moment that guaranteed women this essential liberty. It was, I believe, United States had a span of 72-year period that mirrored similar struggles before women could vote. It was from 1896 to 1909. Over 160 legislative measures were proposed for consideration, and out of those, only 6 were put to a vote, all of them failing. Then we have, in January 1918, a bill passed the House of Representatives, but it was blocked by the Senate. Another vote was scheduled for March of that year, but opponents kept denying it, and there would be not another chance for the suffrage amendment until September. And Wilson was the president at the time, and he pleaded and pleaded for states to pass it. And it turns out that most of the opposition in the Senate came from the Southern Democrats. Let me go back to that state. It was the 1920 presidential election was the first presidential election in which women in every state could vote, because Secretary of State in Bainbridge Colby certified the 19th Amendment 8 days later on August 26, 1920. And that would be represented by this canvas, inequality. Okay, now we're on to the Senate. As of now, in the U.S. Senate, there are 25 women. There are 75 men currently serving in the U.S. Senate. Women remain dramatically unrepresented in the U.S. elected offices. The unrepresentation of women in the United States remains a glaring discrepancy in our political landscape. While strides have been made over the years to address this imbalance, there's a persistent need for concerted efforts to encourage and support more women to pursue and succeed in political leadership roles, ensuring that the Senate mirrors the true mosaic of voices and experiences in our society. And I have some data for how far our country has come. Among those who think the country still has work to do, so I guess it correlates between how far the country has come and the country that has work to do. Among those who think the country still has work to do in achieving gender equality, 77% point to sexual harassment as a major obstacle that women have with equal rights of men. But still majorities point to women not having the same legal rights as men, 67%, different societal expectation for men and women, 66%, and not enough women in positions of power, 64%, as major obstacles to gender equality. Women obviously are more likely to see these as obstacles than men are. And then, So Democrats, 76% say that the country hasn't gone far enough when it comes to giving women equal rights with men. And then while 19% say it's been about right and 4% say the country has gone too far. And then with Republicans, a third say the country hasn't made enough progress, while 48% say it's been about right and 17% say the country has gone too far in giving women equal rights with men. So with that being said, we have still a lot of work to do, and this was the canvas that represented that. The chains And it all came together to make a woman that has her hands covered by man's hands. So, yep. Those were my references that I couldn't put them in APA format, but those are what I used.